Hey everyone, so today's adventure, we're going to dive a little bit into some of the generals now. And so not only do I do the regiment sections of each company that was involved in the Civil War and the battles that they battled on or battled in during the Civil War, we're going to also dive into some of the Confederate generals as well as some of the Union generals. Today's general that I have picked is Robert E. Lee, and his middle name is it's Robert Edward Lee. I believe that today's topic will be a really good discussion because I do believe that Robert E. Lee was a great general during his time during the Civil War. He won numerous battles for the Confederacy against the Union. Ultimately, I think the biggest defeat that he suffered was in the hands of General Meade during Gettysburg, July 1st through the 3rd, 1863. So I think ultimately that is what kind of turned the tides for the Union and also damaged the chances of the Confederates to win the Civil War. Robert E. Lee comes from a long history of military ties, and we'll discuss that as well during our segment in today's lesson. But before we dive into that, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I love you guys. Once again, thank you for all the support. You guys are amazing on both the fan page on Facebook as well as on YouTube. I love seeing the comments that come through. I love seeing how many people are viewing the content. You guys are a fantastic group, every one of you guys. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive in because I do have a couple more segments that we're going to talk about today. So after Robert E. Lee segment, I'm going to talk about the 15th or the Georgia regiments that was involved in the Civil War, as well as Andersonville. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more insight and history of the Andersonville prison, which was a Confederate prison for the Union soldiers that was captured during the Civil War. So stay tuned for those videos as well after we finish this video. Now, Robert E. Lee was born to a Revolutionary War hero, Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee, in Stafford Hall, Virginia. Robert Edward Lee seemed destined for military greatness. Despite financial hardship that caused his father to depart to the West Indies, young Robert secured an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he graduated second in the class of 1829. 2 years later, he married Mary Ann Randolph Custey, a descendant of George Washington's adopted son, John Parke Custey. Yet, with all his military pedigree, Lee had not set foot on a battlefield. Instead, he served 17 years as an officer in the Corps of Engineers, supervising and inspecting the construction of the nation's coastal defenses. Services during the 1846 War with Mexico, however, changed that. As a member of General Winfield Scott's staff, Lee distinguished himself, earning 3 brevets for gallitude and emerging from the conflict with the rank of colonel. Now, going back to when it was talking about the construction of nation's coastal defenses, one that I can point out to you guys is from the video of me going down to Fort Pulaski near Tybee Island in Savannah, Georgia. He was there helping with the construction at that fort, as well as Fort Moultrie. So if you guys are ever in the area of either one of those, I would recommend going out there and taking a tour of those forts. I've never been able to see Fort Moultrie yet, but I do plan on wanting to go out there at some point. when I was out there at Fort Pulaski, though, it was a beautiful sight, beautiful scenery. They still have some of the damages on the wall from the cannons that hit during the Civil War, so that's a very interesting fact and cool thing to see as well, to know that there's still some piece of the history of the Civil War attached to the fort that you can see today as well. From 1852 to 1855, Lee served as the superintendent of West Point and was therefore responsible for educating many of the men who would later serve under him, and those who would oppose him on the battlefields of the Civil War. In 1855, he left the academy, took a position in the cavalry, and in 1859 was called upon to put down Abernathy John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Because of his reputation as one of the finest officers in the United States Army, Abraham Lincoln offered the commandment of the federal forces in 1861. Lee declined and tendered his resignation from the Army when the state of Virginia seceded on April 17th, arguing that he could not fight against his own people. Instead, he accepted a general's commission in the newly formed Confederate Army. His first military engagement of the Civil War occurred at Cheat Mountain, Virginia, now West Virginia, on September 11, 1861. It was a Union victory, but Lee's reputation withstood the public criticism that followed. He served as a military advisor to President Jefferson Davis until June 1862, when he was given command of the wounded General Joseph E. Johnston's embattled army on the Virginia Peninsula. Lee renamed his command the Army of Northern Virginia. Under his direction, it would become the most famous and successful of the Confederate armies. This same organization also boasts some of the Confederates' most inspiring military figures, including James Longstreet, Stonewall Jackson, and the flamboyant Cavalier J.E.B. Stuart. With these trusted subordinates, Lee commanded troops that continually manhandled their blue-clad adversary and embraced their generals no matter what the odds. Yet despite foiling several attempts to seize the Confederate capital, Lee recognized that the key to ultimate success was a victory on Northern soil. In September 1862, he launched an invasion into Maryland with the hope of shifting the war's focus away from Virginia. But when a misplaced dispatch outlining the invasion plan was discovered by Union Commander George McClellan, the element of surprise was lost, and the two armies faced off at the Battle of Antietam. Though his plans were no longer a secret, Lee nevertheless managed to fight McClellan to a stalemate on September 17, 1862. Following the bloodiest one-day battle of the war, heavy casualties compelled Lee to withdraw under the cover of darkness. The remainder of 1862 was spent on the defensive, parring Union thirst at Fredericksburg and in May of the following year, Chancellorsville. The masterful victory at Chancellorsville gave Lee great confidence in his army, and the rebel chief was inspired once again to take the fight to enemy soil. In late June of 1863, he began another invasion of the North, meeting the Union host at the crossroad town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. For 3 days, Lee assailed the Federal Army under George G. Meade in what would become the most famous battle of the entire war. Accustomed to seeing the Yankees run in the face of his aggressive troops, Lee attacked strong Union positions on high ground. This time, however, the Federals wouldn't budge. The Confederate war effort reached its high water mark on July 3, 1863, when Lee ordered a massive frontier assault against Meade's center, spearheaded by Virginians under Major General George E. Pickett. The attack, known as Pickett's Charge, was a failure, and Lee recognized that the battle was lost, ordered his men to retreat, taking full responsibility for the defeat. He wrote Jefferson Davis, offering his resignation, which Davis refused to accept. After the stimuluses Union victories at Gettysburg, Vicksburg, Mississippi, General Grant assumed command of the Federal armies. Rather than making Richmond the aim of his campaign, Grant chose to focus the meagre resources at his disposal on destroying Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. In relentless and bloody campaign, the Federal juggernaut bludgeoned the undersupplied rebel band. In spite of his ability to make Grant pay in blood for his aggressive tactics, Lee had been forced to yield the initial to his adversity, and he recognized that the end of the Confederacy was only a matter of time. By the summer of 1864, the Confederates had been forced into waging trench war outside Petersburg. Though President Davis named the Virginian General-in-Chief of all Confederate forces in February 1865, only 2 months later, on April 9, 1865, Lee was forced to surrender his weary and depleted army to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the Civil War. Lee returned home on parole and eventually became the president of Washington College in Virginia, now known as Washington and Lee University. He remained in the position until his death on October 12, 1870, in Lexington, Virginia. So that's a little bit about Robert E. Lee. No matter what the circumstances are, and what's whatever happened during those times of battle, I still think that he was a great leader. But I also believe that Stonewall Jackson was a great leader. General Longstreet, I paid a visit to him as well. He's out there in Georgia, so I was able to make the trip down there and pay my respects to General Longstreet, who was a great general. He actually took over basically Stonewall's position when Stonewall was ultimately shot by his own man during the Battle of Wilderness, and ultimately had his arm amputated, and then he eventually passed away due to pneumonia. That just kind of gives you guys a little bit of the history of Robert E. Lee and some of the battles that he was involved in, and how he ended up surrendering. Now, if you guys remember, April 9th is the day that he surrendered. But I have a couple of videos that I would love for you guys to check out. You have Fort Tyler and Fort Blakely. Those two battles actually took place a little bit after the surrender of Robert E. Lee. So just because he surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, the war not necessarily ended. There was a couple battles that took place after the official signing. Also, General Joseph E. Johnston was the last Confederate general to surrender on the battlefield. And it was General Sherman that ultimately handed Joseph E. Johnston the opportunity to surrender his army because of the battles that he was losing against Sherman in the Carolinas. But with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you guys check out all my most recent videos. And I love you guys and continue supporting me. Talk to you guys again soon.